So his topic is you saw as the title was on the presentation, I left the Watchtower, why should I believe in anything at all? Brother Don.
Hello there.
Hello, Robert.
Excuse me, do I know you?
I don't believe so. Baker Thomas, pleased to make your acquaintance, Robert.
Why do you insist on calling me Robert? My name is Lewis.
You're Robert to me.
I don't even know you.
Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you? As far as I'm concerned, you're my brother-in-law.
You're a loony.
Looney, you tell me, what is it in this world that makes one person sane and another one insane? Society. And I don't believe in society. Therefore, it does not exist. Consequently, I do not believe there is any such thing as insanity.
You really have lost it.
Lost what?
Nothing.
Ha! Exactly. You see, most people lose something. I lose nothing. Therefore, I have nothing to lose. It's as simple as 2 + 2.
It equals 4 in my world.
7. Robert, you are such a narrow-minded thinker. 2 + 2 = 7. 7.
What about 3 and 3?
9.
That's 3 times 3.
I don't believe in multiplication.
What else don't you believe in?
Oh, lots of things. Like, for instance, gravity.
You don't believe in gravity?
It doesn't work for me.
Why are you sitting here?
By choice.
I suppose you could just float away if you felt like it.
If I was so inclined, but I'm not, so don't ask me.
Is there anything you do believe in?
Yes. I believe in Jesus.
Oh, you do?
Yes. See?
What's that?
That's Jesus.
That's not Jesus, that's a rubber ball.
It's Jesus to me.
I suppose you've got the rest of the Trinity in your wallet.
No, as Jesus, I'm God, and this is the Holy Spirit.
You are seriously disillusioned.
I have an open mind.
Having an open mind does not mean calling white, white, and thinking God is a rubber ball you bounce on the sidewalk.
I'm God, as Jesus.
All right, fine.
Fine.
Let me ask you this.
What?
What do you think this is?
I call that an attaché.
Ah, but I call it a pillow. What do you think this is?
It's my wallet.
Wrong again. This is your fear and anxiety.
Where's my wallet, Robert? Help! I've been robbed. I can't you see?
Hello, Robert.
My name's not Robert.
Well, it is to me.
Well, Bob was right. I look for weird things I like because I think they're good teaching tools. Anyone who's watched our YouTube channel knows that we like satire. We have our own made-up commercials, things like the marketing of Benny Hinn Holy Ghost machine guns to blow away those who disagree with you, or charlatan tissue to clean up on that ministry business, keep those butts in the pew, tested out by Joel Osteen himself, charlatan tissue. About 100 years ago, this is not a true story, it's just a story, but it kind of gets us started on what we need to talk about, or what I am kind of assigned to talk about this morning. About 100 years ago, the Pope declared all of the Jews would have to leave the Vatican, and there was an uproar in the Jewish community, as you might imagine, and so they challenged the Pope to a debate, and the Pope agreed. And so the Jews got together and they picked for the representative a middle-aged man by the name of Moish. And Moish thought to make it a little more interesting, asked for an addition to the debate, and that is that neither side would be allowed to talk. The Pope agreed to that as well. And so the day of the debate came and they gathered together and the Pope and Moish sat opposite one another for a few minutes. And finally the Pope raised 3 fingers. And Moish, without wasting a moment, raised 1 finger. The Pope then waved 3 fingers, his fingers around a circle around his head, and Moish pointed to the ground where he sat. The Pope took out a wafer and a glass of wine, and Moish took out an apple, at which point the Pope got up and said, "I give up. This man is too good. The Jews can stay." A little while later, as the Pope gathered with the bishops, and they said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Well, I raised 3 fingers to represent the Trinity, and he represented one finger to remind us that there's one God common to both of our religions. I waved my fingers in a circle around my head, and he pointed to the ground to remind us that God was with us. I was saying that God is all around us. I took out a wafer and a glass of wine to demonstrate God's forgiveness, his death on the cross. He took out an apple to remind us of sin. As the Jewish community gathered together, they said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, first," he said, "you Jews have 3 days to get out of town." And I said, "Not one of us is leaving." Then he said the whole city would be cleared of Jews, and I said, "We're going to stay right here." And then, I don't know, he took out his lunch, so I took out mine. Very often, what we are dealing with is a problem of communication. We are trying to communicate with somebody, and we're using the same words, but they have different meanings. They come with sort of preconceptions about things. We saw that in a short video. They had different definitions to their terminology. So how do we deal with the question of, I left the Watchtower, why should I believe anything at all? Can we have the next slide here? So I was somewhere. I got myself completely dazed and confused now. Language definitions, argumentation, show a Jehovah's Witness how the Watchtower lied to them, and they'll leave, right? They'll go, "Oh my, I missed that all of my life." Or talk with an atheist and give them 12 arguments for why they ought to believe, and they'll go, "No one ever showed me that before." And you know what? It doesn't work that way. Red Havit's one of my heroes of the faith, partly because one of the talks he did years ago focused on this issue. You go, you want to reach someone for Christ, and you go to every kind of convention you can where you're going to learn a witnessing technique. And the evangelist will stand up and say, "I have led thousands of fill in the blank to the Lord this way." And you go, "I am going to learn that." And you practice it, and you make your family crazy with it. And then you go out, and you fail. It doesn't work. And after a while, you go, "Maybe I'm not called to reach anyone for Christ." But there's other things going on in the mix. One of my departed friends, he's with the Lord now, one of the co-founders of Jews for Jesus, Jan Moskowitz, loved Jan Moskowitz, probably one of the finest Bible teachers I ever met, would often say, and we would have him at our apologetics conventions, and he would stand up, and the first things he would say is, "I don't like apologists." Now that got everyone's attention immediately. They all sat up straight to say, "Okay, what are you going to say next?" And he would say, "Because they think if you give the right argument, someone will believe." But faith is a choice. It is based on how I feel about something, not on an argument that I'm given. Now, it doesn't mean defense of the faith isn't important. It isn't. It is biblical to do that. But they choose. It's an act of the will, not a function of information. You choose to believe. What holds you back from that choice? Well, there are a number of things, but 3 of them I would say is one, cults and what I call the mom doctrine. Cults and the mom doctrine kind of works this way. Some have heard me talk about this before. It's an important concept that we miss. Is your mother alive? Do you like your mom? Do you trust your mom? Do you think your mom was always doing the best for you? Trying to do the best for you. Okay. Now, what if I told you that there's things about your mother that you don't know that I need to tell you? I mean, I've been up here 3-4 minutes now, and you should tell that I'm trustworthy because I have a suit on, and I'm behind the podium, so that means I'm trustworthy, right? Your mom runs all of the drugs in her area. How would you respond to that? Yeah, you don't really believe that, right? And it's actually worse than that. She runs all of the prostitution in your area as well. Would you believe that? What if I could show you evidence that it's true? Would you believe it if I even showed you evidence? Yeah, maybe not. You might even try to fight me over it. So here's the problem. When you're talking with someone in a false religious system, the system is mom. right? Roman Catholicism is straight up about it. You cannot have faith apart from Mom. It is the Holy Mother Church. God is your father, the church is Mom. The Watchtower Bible Tract Society, what do they say? It's the motherly organization. Listen to the words of your father and obey the teaching of Mom. So it's emotional when you are talking to someone who is a Jehovah's Witness. They are not simply leaving a religious belief system. It is Mom you're talking about. They are emotionally bounded to this. That is one of the reasons why when they leave the Watchtower, if they haven't kind of been counseled out, they tend to become atheists, for example. But unusual atheists because they're atheists who will defend the Watchtower doctrine to the death. It's a weird kind of a thing. The second issue is what I would call the myth of the pristine faith. What do I mean by that? Virtually every group, if you ask them, where do your teachings come from? They're going to tell you, we're trying to get back to the first century church, right? We want that unity, that holy love, the pristine biblical teaching that they experienced at the hands of the Apostle Paul and Peter. And I go, have you guys read the Bible? What do you mean? The pristine faith that you imagine, that you're romanticizing about, never existed. You cannot read the Bible and find it. It just isn't there. Every letter that was written for a couple of reasons. The first one is to correct false teaching. Where? In the church. The pristine faith never existed. You had heretics all the way from the first century. And that is why you have more teaching in the New Testament saying, watch for false teachers, watch for false prophets. Paul says to the Ephesian elders in Acts 20:28, guard the flock from false teachers that are going to creep in and from those who will rise from within. So the pristine faith doesn't exist. They already distrust all other church organizations. Why? Because they've been told by whatever organization they are part of, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Roman Catholics, doesn't really matter, that they are all evil. They're all apostate. You can't trust them. So when you leave an organization, where are you going to go? You've already been persuaded that the other ones are all false. So you're going to have to look for something not associated with Christianity. And you've been abused by the Bible in the process of being in whatever organization you're in. Now, this next slide. I'm going to mention this book. It's a book, we have it on our table. It's available for like $10 or something. It's about a guy named Bill Gothard, but it's more important than that. The epilogue is a chapter called Fear of Flying. It deals with all of the issues of what holds people in organizations. Why are they afraid to leave? Chapter 5 deals with the issue of grace, which is not well taught in many churches. Unfortunately, grace becomes the name of a lady living down the street. It isn't something that's actually practiced. The Watchtower, Bill Gothard, others will tell you that grace is some substance, something you earn by doing the right kinds of works. Roman Catholics do the same thing. It is in a big pot somewhere at the end of a rainbow, and you go and get more grace to do more good works, which then earn you more grace to do more good works. When in reality, grace is simple. It is, we call it unmerited favor. It really is a kindly attitude toward the undeserving. We don't deserve. God has a kindly attitude toward us anyway. And that is what grace is. So, that could be helpful. When I was a new believer, I went to a church, and we had this elderly gentleman that would greet us at the door each morning with this statement. He would say, "What do you know that isn't so?" Now, he was doing it for fun, but it is really a good question. What do you know that isn't so? When you sit here today, have you thought about what you believe and why you believe it? What is in your belief system that isn't true? All of us have something. We just don't always think about it. Why? Because very often our worldview, which is what we're talking about, comes to us by osmosis. You know what osmosis is? You sort of absorb it. It's in the air we breathe. It's in the books we read. It's in the films we watch. It's in the radio programs we listen to. Our beliefs are built into us a little at a time, very gradually, by people that we trust, and we never really think about asking the question, how do I know that is so? We don't really do that. Because we know, we know this person here, and we know they wouldn't intentionally mislead us. What we don't know is they unintentionally were misled themselves and believed something that was false that was then passed on to us. So we need to examine those kinds of things. So we're going to have 4 questions about a worldview that a worldview ought to answer. They are origins. Where did I come from? Meaning, why am I here? Morality, why should I live any particular way at all? And destiny, what happens after I die? Everyone's really dealing with those kinds of questions, and our worldview answers those questions. And so as I leave the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, sometimes, more often than not, I go to the wrong source trying to figure out what to do next. So, as a Jehovah's Witness, YouTube, someone mentioned YouTube, great resource, but it really is our modern day Mars Hill. So you might have a great source of YouTube videos, for example, to listen to, that can give you really good teaching. But you have a plethora, a ton of unbelievably false, weird stuff out there. And how do you sort out in between those? If you don't have a solid worldview to work from, you don't. And so there's one YouTube channel, for example, has 11,000 subscribers, most of them ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. It is an atheist YouTube channel that says Jehovah of the Old Testament is Satan. And so I have them arguing with me all the time, and I have to then, as kindly as I can, go through the text of Scripture one step at a time to demonstrate that they have been deceived. The problem is they don't have the right kind of tools to ask the right kind of questions. Why? Because they're still Jehovah's Witnesses at heart. And by even approaching this subject this way, they feel like I'm attacking, guess who? Mom. Mom was an abuser, and I left home. I'm no longer a Jehovah's Witness. I don't adhere to the Watchtower. But it's still my mom. And you can't attack my mom. I had a call like that last week. A Jehovah's Witness. She's been out since, she's been out 12 years now. Hasn't talked to anybody about it in 12 years. Wants to know what to do next. But don't talk about the Watchtower, she said. Where do you even begin? I have to start somewhere else. I have to start with questions of worldviews. Some good resources I would recommend. Choosing Your Faith, Mark Middleberg. Nice, well done book, very kind, good attitude. Gives you some good guidelines just for asking good kinds of questions about what I should believe. Christian Apologetics, Doug Powell. I really like this one a lot. It's done by a graphic artist. So you have some really, really interesting photos and artwork in it. And it's a good apologetics resource. He does a good job on worldviews. We've done it in our church in small group situations. It's very good interactive material. My friend Dr. Norm Geiser has the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. I probably give out more of these every year than any other book, because it covers the 7 basic worldviews and how they self-destruct under scrutiny. The 7 worldviews are these. Atheism. Next. Fairly simple. Atheists do not believe that God exists. That's pretty straightforward. Deism. Deists believed that God exists, but rejected the idea of miracles. Thomas Jefferson was a deist, for example. Some of the early founders of our nation were deists. They did believe in God. They weren't Christians. They believed God existed, and then after he exists. After he created everything, he just sort of went on vacation. He doesn't really interact with us. He doesn't do miracles. Pantheism, pantheists believe that everything is God. Panentheism is sort of my more academic, high-minded idea that God is growing and developing as the world grows and develops. We create God as he creates us. So we're kind of in a mutual relationship there. Finite Godism, God exists, but he's kind of limited. He would like evil not to exist, but he doesn't really have power over that. And so he does the best we can. Rabbi Kushner kind of popularized that in the 1970s with why do bad things happen to good people. Polytheism, that would be Mormonism, are polytheist. Finite Godism, God is limited. I talked about that. And then theism, which would be in Jewish, Christian, and Islam. There's one God who exists, who created everything else. So those are the 7 basic worldviews. And asking what a worldview is, should be, it has to have really 2 components. It should be coherent, it should stick together, and if tested, it should not self-destruct under scrutiny. So it's coherent, it coheres with itself. The second part of it is that correspondent. It should correspond to the universe around us as we see it. An example would be Christian Science. Anyone know any Christian scientists? I like Christian scientists. They're fun to talk to. Because Christian Science says the physical world doesn't exist. It is a mind science group, and so everything is mind. You're not really sick, you just think you're sick. You can't be sick because you don't physically exist, and the sickness would have to be, in the physical body. And Mary Baker Eddy writes really interesting to read because she's quite adamant on this view. They're basically Hindus using Christian terminology. But she writes about how that a child doesn't know that they can't breathe underwater. And so if you just throw one in the water, you leave them alone, they'll be done in 20, 30 minutes, no big deal, because they don't know they're not supposed to be able to breathe underwater, and so they just do, because guess what? There is no water, there is no them to drown. And it's only when you start coming under the delusion that there's a physical world that you get into trouble. And so that's why they have practitioners. When you think you're sick, you go to a practitioner and you pay them to convince you that you don't exist. So you can't be sick. So, I had a lady call me. She had a Christian Science person who was selling her advertising in the newspaper all the time. And she said, how do I even begin with this person? I said, okay, I like questions, and I just think they're preferable because they cause people to start thinking. And so when she comes next time after your ad is run with a bill, just ask her, well, what is that? What is that? It appears to be a bill. But I know it can't be because there is no such thing as a bill. and you wouldn't expect me to pay because there's no such thing as money. And then see where you go from there. And she tried it, and guess what? She got to talk to her about the gospel. Because she suddenly confronted that her worldview doesn't correspond to the world she actually lives in. Questions oftentimes are easier than accusations and assertions. So here's a question. Does God exist or not exist? That's really our starting point, because we're going to deal with the question of atheism versus other stuff, or Hinduism versus other stuff. Does God exist or not exist? Fairly simple. Both views have a creation story. We don't often think about it that way. Atheists have a creation story. Christians have a creation story. Which one seems to make the most sense? Now, we're not going to be able to go through all of the arguments today, obviously, because we're running about 15 minutes behind schedule, so hold your appetites. You'll be fed in a few minutes. Both have creation stories, and there are fun ways to deal with them. One, you could spend a lot of time, and for those of us who like these kinds of things, you will spend a lot of time reading information by young earth and progressive creationists and get armed to talk with non-believers about the issues of how everything came to be. Because I have to tell you something, atheist creation story self-destructs under scrutiny. Frankly, I tend to be a young earther from creation standpoint, but I don't really know because I can't get on the other side of the event to measure. I can't tell you how long ago it was. I just don't really know. Neither can anybody else. That's the problem with that. But there are things that we can test and examine. And so, some years ago, I was asked to go and debate a professor at a junior college who claimed to be a Christian but believed in evolution. It was great fun. I agreed. I had never done a debate in my life, ever. Not a formal debate anyway. And so they asked me to go, and I said, it'd be fun for me to try that. I like trying new things, and so yeah, I'll go, and it'll be great fun. And so he posed the question before I came, is he a young earth creationist? Because I won't get caught dead in a room with a young earth creationist, he said. So much for open-minded discussion. And I said, well, I tend to be, yes, I tend to be, like Norm Geisler says, he tends to be a young earth creationist about 3 days a week. I tend to be a young earth creationist all the time. But I'm not going to die for that. So he decided not to debate me. So I went and I gave my presentation. At the end of it, one of the students came up and said, well, the way you tell it sounds like creationism is true. And I go, well, duh, that's what I'm defending, right? So they had a professor come, and I heard about it, and I showed up. So he was in a room with a young earth creationist, as it turns out, afterwards. And he did his whole presentation. I listened. I was front row, like sitting in the front row, except in church. Then I become Baptist and I sit in the back row. And so he gave his presentation, and when he got done, I raised my hand and said, I just have really kind of one question. Maybe you can help me with it. Let's assume for the moment that in the beginning was nothing, which is your story, and my story, right? And in the beginning was nothing, and then from nothing, for no apparent reason, uncaused, everything just exploded into existence. Let's just assume that's true. And from that, everything that we recognize now as planets and solar systems and suns and all of that just sort of popped into existence from that explosion, from nothing for no apparent reason. Let's just assume all of that's true. And then time began to exist because time is part of the creation. It didn't exist prior to creation. So now we can actually measure things. Okay, let's assume that's true. And then on at least one of those, we'll call it a planet, that sprang into existence from nothing by nothing for no apparent reason. A substance we'll call primordial soup just appeared. We don't know where it came. It just appeared. And out of that primordial soup, for no apparent reason, 21 amino acids just sprang into existence and stuck together and created a cell. Now, we all are aware that the best form of reproduction is single cell divide and multiply. And that's really cool. You don't have to date, you don't have to meet anyone, you don't have to go out to dinner or a movie, you don't even talk, you don't even have to like each other. You just divide and multiply, that's it. Simple. How do you go from that to male-female production? What are the steps in between? Because we know that reproduction is difficult for males and females, even under good circumstances. Lots of things can go wrong. So without everything in place working fully functional, it doesn't happen. So it seems to me what you need is a male to pop into existence, fully formed and functioning at a point in time, ready to reproduce. But that's not done. You're not done yet. Because guess what? You got to have a female pop into existence, fully formed and functioning, ready to reproduce. But you're still not done yet. Because guess what? They have to both pop into existence at about the same time in history, or they won't meet. But you're still not done, because they have to pop into history at about the same time, fully formed and functioning, ready to reproduce, in about the same location. Wouldn't help to have one, say, in Wisconsin and one in Argentina. Doesn't really help. And then they have to like each other. So it sounds to me like you have to have, let's say everything else is true, you have to have at least 4 miracles to have Darwinian evolution. How does that work? And he looked at me and he said, no one's ever asked me that before. I don't know, but I'm sure it happened. Why? Because he believes Mom about this issue. You see what that goes back to? It has nothing to do with information at that point. He's committed to an idea. He's committed to his creation story. And we'll see how quickly we can get through the rest of this, because it starts providing with answers about how we ask questions. For example, atheism, simple. What do atheists believe about God? Equals no. Theos equals God. Plus theist equals no God. Simple definition, God doesn't exist. I was an atheist. When I started looking at information at the request of my lovely wife, I realized I couldn't be honest and an atheist, because it's a claim to know something I can't know. I can't know that God never existed, what doesn't exist, and will never exist. I can't know that. I can't know because I would have to be everywhere in the universe, at all times in the universe, past, present, and future, to know that. And only God qualifies to meet those kind of criteria. But I thought I could be an agnostic. I thought that would be a good solution. The problem was agnosticism says I don't know if God exists, but I want to know stuff. So I really couldn't be a good agnostic. And so I came to the faith because the evidence for the existence of God was persuasive, just in creation. Now there's more to it to become a Christian, but that's what got me on the road. Another one I had to look at was pantheism. Now, I'm going to be at something called the Parliament of the World's Religions in November. I'd love to go there. It'll be in Toronto. There'll be about 200 religions all in one place. Evangelicals are not invited, but about 20 of us will be there. And I will hang out with the Wiccans and the Hindus and the Buddhists. Oh my. And it will be great fun because I'll get to ask lots of questions. So pantheism, all is God, everything is God, and we have that in such things as Hinduism, New Age, Wicca, American Indian religions, all have some forms of this idea that everything is God. We have it in popular films like Star Wars, The Lion King, Pocahontas. Your kids are being taught this worldview as you're watching this. I'm not saying not to watch it, I'm saying use it as a teaching tool. Because all the other kids are seeing these things and being taught this stuff. Use it as a teaching tool. I raised my kids apologetically by watching these things with them and talking about what they were learning. What do they believe about God? Well, we see it in Star Wars. From Yoda the Yogi, who says, the Force is all around us. It's in the rocks. It's in the trees. Marianne Williamson, in her book Return to Love, tells us that she was eating breakfast one morning and she realized that she was God, pouring God onto God as she was making her cereal. Because everything is God, pantheism. Now we'll skip the next one to Taoism, which is also in this realm. Taoists ask questions like, what is the sun to one hand? Clapping, if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, doesn't make a noise. Rush Limbaugh has reframed that and said, if a man is in the woods and he's talking and there's no woman there to hear him, is he still wrong? I won't do the opposite one of that because I don't want women to come up and beat me to death. The world in Hinduism, all is Maya, all is illusion. There is no physical reality, therefore the world doesn't actually exist. What about evil? Well, ultimately there is no evil according to them because there is no action, there's no good or evil of any kind. But you have karma, and so you have karmic evolvement. So they have a spiritual evolution of sorts, where you go from the low-level life to high-level life. And I like to ask the question then, well, let's say I was a frog in a previous life. What sort of moral wrong can a frog commit to prevent me from growing into being a human? How does that work exactly? So here's something I like to ask pantheists. Something just for me, because it's fun. If everything is God, the rocks are God, the trees are God, The chairs are God, the flowers are God, the piano's God, everything is God. That makes it feel like we're elevating everything to the status of Godhood. Isn't it great? But as I think about it, if everything is God, then the rocks are God, the trees are God, the chairs are God, you're God, I'm God, and what my cat left in the litter box this morning is God. Haven't we reduced everything to the lowest level instead of raising it? Now guess what? I have an opportunity to talk to them. When a Jehovah's Witness is leaving the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, ask questions. Become informed about world views so that you can pose a variety of questions. And then do what I call a question and a Danish. I love a question and a Danish, mostly because I love Danish. A question and a Danish. We all think that when we ask the question, we have to have an answer right this minute, and we stare at it waiting for the answer. Don't do that. Ask the question, offer them a cup of coffee, and a drink. And let the question simmer on their brain. Why? Because the Holy Spirit works when you're not. And all this stuff filters in, and you start thinking about it a little at a time, and you'll start thinking about other kinds of questions over time. It doesn't happen in a minute. They didn't become a Jehovah's Witness in 5 minutes. They didn't leave the Watchtower and become un-Jehovah's Witness. They're still more of the time Jehovah's Witnesses, at least emotionally and intellectually. And so they go to the YouTube and they see stuff that they're taught by those who know, and they don't know how to question. So questions, ask questions, help them to be able to ask questions. The last one is polytheist that we'll talk about today. Polytheists believe that there are many gods, and we have sort of an ancient polytheism list here, which might be helpful to some. Boom. Yeah, polytheism has been with us for a very long time, and we have pantheons of gods you can choose from. I like Wicca. If I wasn't a Christian, I'd probably be a Wiccan. I just think it's a cool religion because you can make up whatever you want, and there are no absolutes. But here's a question I use on Wiccans because it's so cool. They're relativists, like the guys in our video. They're relativists. There is no absolute. There's only my truth and your truth, and they can be opposite, but they're still true until they collide and they self-destruct. So my question to an atheist, or to a Wiccan is it okay to burn witches? What do you think they're going to say? No, it's not okay to burn witches. In fact, they have a whole thing about the wrongness of burning witches. And they say, well, the Wiccan Rite of 3, the one thing they hold to be true, which says, and harm none, do as you will. You can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't harm anyone. I go, well, okay, but here's a problem. If truth is relative, and your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth, what if my truth is that the Wiccan Rite of 3 is true for you, but not for me? Maybe my truth is it's okay to beat witches, chain them to the back of my car, drive down the road with them flailing away behind me, and then burn them. In fact, as I think about it, beating a witch, burning a witch, or taking a witch to lunch are sort of all morally neutral choices. How do you think they respond? Now, well, they might walk away angry, but most of the time I get a hearing. I get an opportunity to kind of talk with them further to ask more questions. So, I've left the Watchtower. Why should I believe anything now? Because you do believe something. The question is, what do you believe, and is it true? And what do you know that isn't so? Are you willing to test your belief? Would you be willing to go through Doug Powell's book with me? We can sit down, we can have coffee, we can have lunch. We don't have to agree. It should be fun. I'll even make lunch for you every week. And now we're going to get ready for lunch, so should I dismiss everyone or turn it over to some other dismisser?
Pray.